Okay, so picture this. You're setting up a profile on a dating app.
Hmm.
You're picking out your best photos.
Right, the ones with the good lighting.
Yeah, exactly. And you're listing your hobbies,
Yeah.
like hiking or trying new restaurants, whatever. And
Mhm.
maybe you even throw in your political leaning or your zodiac sign. Basically, you are curating you.
You're presenting the individual, the sort of my life, my choice version of you.
Exactly. But today, we are jumping into a deep dive on a source that argues you are leaving out literally the only data point that actually matters to nature.
And it is definitely not your personality,
No, it's not. It's your genetic history.
which is a really fascinating pivot. I mean, we are looking at this incredibly provocative piece of writing today. It's titled Ancient Biointelligence, the Genetic Science of Gotra and Tradition. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the title, I kind of thought we were going to be talking about religious rituals.
Right. Or maybe some sort of social hierarchy history lesson,
Yeah.
like a breakdown of the caste system or so.
Yeah, exactly.
But this text, it essentially claims that what we think of as backward traditions, things like arranged marriage rules or Gotra and Sapinda, are actually a highly sophisticated, thousands-of-year-old biological firewall.
Biological firewall. That is such a great way to put it, because the central thesis here is really a clash between two massive concepts. On one side, you have the modern trigger word, right? Freedom.
The whole I do what I want with whomever I want.
Right. And then on the other side, you have what the source calls biointelligence.
And the source doesn't pull any punches either. It starts right off by just attacking our modern ego. It basically says, you think your body is yours. Cute. Your body is actually your ancestors' investment.
That line really stopped me in my tracks. Your ancestors' investment. It completely shifts the ownership, doesn't it?
It really does.
It suggests that you aren't just this individual floating in space. You are the current CEO of a genetic corporation that has been running for 10,000 years.
Wow.
And your job, biologically speaking, isn't just to be happy. It's to not bankrupt the company.
Which brings us to the mission of this whole deep dive, right? Exploring what the source calls a genetic audit. It argues that ancient sages, the rishis, they weren't just sitting around making up rules to make life difficult for young lovers.
Right. They were conducting a massive, multi-generational genetic audit. And this is where we have to be willing to suspend our disbelief for a bit.
Because it's a big claim.
It's a huge claim. The source is suggesting that these ancient thinkers identified things like DNA mutations and the dangers of recessive genes long before we had microscopes or the Human Genome Project or the Lancet.
I mean, we're talking about people who didn't have electricity, let alone gene sequencing labs. How could they possibly know this stuff?
Well, the source argues they did it through observation and rigid data tracking, which is what we now call tradition. And to understand why they were so obsessed with this, we have to look at the problem they were trying to solve.
The biological crisis.
Yes, the biological crisis.
Which is basically what happens when you marry someone too seemingly similar to you. The text actually asks you, the listener, to take off your modern glasses.
Right, the glasses where we see everything through the lens of romance and civil rights.
Exactly. Take those off and look at the raw data of consanguinity.
Consanguinity, which is a fancy scientific word for blood relation, marrying within the family or clan.
Now, most people know, generally, don't marry your cousin. It's a taboo in a lot of places. But the source breaks down the why in a way that's actually kind of terrifying. It talks about silent killers.
This is a part that feels like a medical thriller, because we all carry recessive genes, little genetic glitches or mutations.
Right.
But usually they are silent. They don't do anything because they are paired with a healthy gene from your other parent. They just sort of sleep in your DNA.
Okay, so I'm walking around with these sleeping dragons in my blood, but they aren't waking up.
Exactly. And here is the absolute key. If you marry someone who also carries that exact same silent gene, those two dragons meet.
And they wake up.
And they wake up. The source points out that when you marry within the same lineage, the probability of you and your partner having the exact same recessive defect isn't just a little bit higher, it skyrockets.
Yeah, the text mentions a multiplier effect. It says the risk increases by 10 times.
10 times.
That is a massive statistical jump.
In biology, a tenfold increase is the difference between a rare anomaly and a public health crisis. And the source actually provides a real-world case study to back this up. It cites a specific report from the BBC regarding the Pakistani community in Britain.
Now, we need to be very clear here. We're just reporting what the source material is presenting as data. We aren't taking sides on any cultural practices.
Absolutely. The source is just using this as a contemporary example of what happens when those ancient audit rules aren't followed. And the data point it presents is stark. It says this demographic makes up about 3% of the British population.
Okay, 3%.
But according to the source's citation, they account for roughly 33% of the children born with genetic disorders.
3% of the population, but 33% of the disorders. That is just statistically overwhelming.
It is. And the source attributes this directly to the cultural norm of cousin marriage in that specific community. It lists the actual consequences, too. Thalassemia, cystic fibrosis, microcephaly.
Microcephaly, that's where the brain doesn't develop properly, right? The head is significantly smaller.
Yes, it's a lifelong and often devastating condition. And thalassemia requires constant blood transfusions. These aren't just quirky traits, these are severe survival threats.
So the argument the source is making is that the ancient traditions didn't ban you from marrying your cousin because they were just mean or controlling.
Yeah.
They did it because they had seen what happens when you don't. They were trying to stop these silent killers.
Exactly. They identified the problem. Inbreeding destroys the software of the human body.
Okay, so they identified the problem. But here is where the text gets into the solution. And honestly, this is where I got a bit skeptical at first. Because it starts talking about Gotra.
Gotra, yes.
Yeah. And usually when I hear Gotra, I just think of caste. I think of social exclusion, like, you aren't one of us.
Sure, that's the modern sociological view of it. But the source claims Gotra is actually a Y chromosome tracking system.
Which is a fascinating rebrand.
It really is. But biologically, it holds water. The Y chromosome is unique. It only exists in men, and it passes from father to son with almost zero change.
Zero change.
Virtually zero. It doesn't mix with the mother's DNA the way all the other chromosomes do.
So my Y chromosome is basically just a Xerox copy of my dad's, and his dad's going back centuries.
Yes, it's like a biological surname that you literally cannot change. And the source argues that thousands of years ago, the rishis realized that the male line carries this specific, unadulterated biological signature.
But again, I just come back to how. How do you figure that out without a lab?
Pattern recognition.
Just observing.
Just observing thousands of families over hundreds of years, you notice that certain traits and specific defects travel down the male line in a very specific way. So they created the Gotra system. You belong to the Gotra of your ancient male ancestor.
Okay.
And the golden rule of this system is you never, ever marry a woman from the same Gotra.
Because if she is from the same Gotra, she is technically your sister, genetically speaking.
Yeah.
Even if you've never met her and she lives 1,000 miles away.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because she carries the markers of that same genetic signature on that lineage. If you marry her, you risk that inbreeding depression we talked about earlier.
The gene pool just becomes stagnant.
Exactly. The source uses a financial analogy. You have to diversify your portfolio.
Right. To get hybrid vigor. I love that term. It sounds like a generic energy drink, but it's actually this huge biological goal.
It does sound like an energy drink hybrid vigor.
Right.
But in evolutionary biology, it is the absolute gold standard. When you mix two very different genetic lines, the offspring tend to be stronger, taller, and way more immune to disease.
So the source claims that the Gotra system was planned engineering to force this hybrid vigor.
Yes. By forbidding you from marrying anyone who shares your barcode, they were essentially forcing the gene pool to stay fresh, preventing the collapse of the stock.
Okay, so Gotra covers the broad strokes, the macro lineage. But the source gets even more granular than that. It starts talking about Kundli matching horoscopes.
Right, the premarital screening.
And specifically, something called Nadi. Now, I really have to ask, are we drifting into pseudoscience here? Because checking if the stars align feels a lot less scientific than tracking chromosomes.
That is the most common reaction. People say, oh, it's just astrology, but the source digs into the Ashtakut system.
What is that exactly?
It's the traditional point system for matching couples in this culture. There are 36 points total, and Nadi accounts for 8 of them.
So it's heavily weighted.
It is the single most important factor. If the Nadi doesn't match, the marriage is usually called off no matter how much the couple likes each other or how rich the families are.
So what is Nadi, really, if it's not just a star sign?
The source argues Nadi is a categorization of your physiological constitution. It links it directly to Ayurveda, specifically Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
Okay, slow down for a second. For the listeners who haven't done a yoga teacher training, what are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha?
Fair question. In Ayurveda, they are the 3 bioenergies that govern your body. Vata is air and ether, so it's movement, nervous energy.
Okay,
Pitta is fire, metabolism, digestion, heat. And Kapha is earth and water structure, stability, fluids. We all have a mix of them, but usually one dominates.
got it. So I might be a pitta-type fiery high metabolism, and my partner might be kapha calm stable.
Right. Now here is the aha moment from the text. The strict rule of Nadi is that you cannot marry someone with the same Nadi.
Wait, so if you are vata, you shouldn't marry another vata.
Correct.
See, that seems counterintuitive to me. Usually on dating apps, we want things in common. We both love spicy food. We both run hot. Why would that be bad?
Because of oversimilarity. This is the biocompatibility check. If you take two people who are highly Vata-anxious, high-energy prone to nervous system issues, and they have a child, the source argues that the child inherits an exaggerated version of that imbalance.
I see. It's like constructive interference in sound waves. Two waves hit, and they make a massive spike.
That's a great analogy.
And you don't want a spike in your nervous system. You want balance.
Exactly. You want the fire of Pitta to balance the cold of Kapha. You want complementary energies, not identical ones. The source claims that Nadi dosh, which means a defect in Nadi matching, directly leads to genetically weak or unstable offspring. It's an ancient check against biological redundancy.
You know what's funny, or maybe ironic is the better word, is that we still do this today. We just charge a lot more money for it.
We absolutely do.
The source actually points this out. It says modern couples are spending thousands on premarital genetic screening.
Oh, yeah.
We go to a fancy clinic, we spit in a tube, and a doctor tells us if we are carriers for the same diseases.
And we pat ourselves on the back for being so responsible and scientific. Look at us ensuring the health of our future children.
Meanwhile, the source says, we threw the science into the trash bin labeled superstition because we thought we were too smart for it, and now we're paying labs to buy it back.
That is a scathing critique, isn't it?
Okay.
It frames modern society as having torn down a fence because we didn't know why it was built in the first place.
Right.
We looked at Nadi and Gotra and said, this restricts my freedom, this is old-fashioned, so we tore it down. And now that the wolves, meaning the genetic disorders getting in, we are frantically building a high-tech electric fence in the exact same spot.
It really makes you wonder, did we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Just because something is wrapped in religious language or ritual, does that mean the underlying mechanism is broken?
And that is the core question of the philosophy section of this source.
Yeah.
This is where the text pivots from heart biology to psychology. It starts doing what it calls shadow work on the modern mind.
Yeah, this part felt less like a science lecture and more like a mirror being held up to us. It talks about hubris, the modern ego.
It directly challenges the rebel identity. Because we love being rebels, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to do what my parents did. I'm breaking the cycle.
It feels good. It feels empowering to disrupt things. But the source asks a very uncomfortable question. It says, fine, reject the religious symbols. Don't go to the temple. Don't wear the tilak. That is your social choice. But can you play politics with your DNA?
That is the line that stuck with me. You can argue with a priest. You could argue with your dad.
Yeah.
But you cannot argue with biology.
Biology does not care about your rights. It only cares about survival. The text suggests that our modern hubris makes us think we are above nature. We think that just because we have smartphones and skyscrapers, the laws of genetics don't apply to us anymore.
There's a maxim in the text that I think sums this whole argument up perfectly. Science proves, faith preserves.
Science proves, faith preserves. It's really profound when you think about it. Scientific proof, the peer-reviewed study, the double-blind trial, that is a very, very recent invention in human history.
But human survival is ancient.
Exactly.
So if you figure out a survival truth 5,000 years ago,
Yeah.
you can't exactly publish it in Nature magazine.
No, you can't. And you can't just explain complex genetics to a population that is mostly illiterate and just busy trying to not starve. So what do?
You wrap the truth in a story.
You wrap it in a ritual. You make it dharma, a sacred duty. You say, the gods forbid you from marrying your Gotra.
Because people will follow a sacred duty. They won't necessarily follow a dry health recommendation from a governing body.
Exactly. Faith acts as the preservation vessel. It carries the data through time across generations, safely delivering that biointelligence to the future. The source argues that these traditions weren't about controlling people, they were about preserving the species. They were thinking on a timeline of millennia.
Meanwhile, we're thinking on a timeline of what? The next dating app, swipe.
Pretty much, and that is the shadow the text is talking about. By ignoring this wisdom, by calling it backward, We aren't being enlightened. We are being biologically reckless. We are behaving like children who found a loaded gun and think it's a toy.
So if we accept this premise, if we accept that marriage in this context isn't just about the you complete me romance, then what is it?
The source is very clear on this. It defines marriage as a merger of gene pools. It's a business transaction between two biological histories.
That sounds remarkably unromantic. I love you. Let's merge our gene pools.
It does take the poetry out of it, but the source argues that the poetry is a modern luxury. The merger is the ancient necessity. And it leaves us with a thought that I found actually quite empowering. It says your very existence is proof that these ancient rules worked.
That's true. We are here. We are healthy enough to be sitting here having this deep dive. We aren't riddled with the genetic defects that wiped out other lineages.
We are the survivors. We are the result of thousands of successful naughty checks and Gotra audits, whether we knew it or not. The source challenges you to stop looking at your heritage with shame or condescension. Instead, look at your blood. That isn't just biology. It's an inheritance of survival intelligence.
It basically calls us to be conscious humans instead of just modern rebels.
Right. A rebel breaks a fence because they just hate fences. A conscious human asks, why was this fence built before they decide to open the gate? The source says true freedom, the freedom we value so much, comes from awareness, not ignorance.
It's a heavy takeaway. It forces you to look at things like arranged marriage or horoscope matching entirely differently. Maybe it wasn't about suppressing love. Maybe it was about ensuring that the love produced something that could actually last.
That is the crux of it. It was about ensuring the lineage lasts. And in a way, that is the ultimate act of love for the future generations.
So the next time you dismiss a tradition as just superstition, maybe ask yourself, is this nonsense? Or is this just science I haven't decoded yet?
Yeah.
It's a powerful thought to leave you with. Consider that your own biointelligence might not be a restriction on your freedom, but actually the most sophisticated survival mechanism flowing right there in your veins.
A very necessary thing to mull over.
We're going to leave you to explore that one on your own. This has been a deep dive into ancient biointelligence. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next one. See you then.